What's up everyone, FinTech here. In this video, I'm going to be going through every source I can possibly find to try to determine how much money YouTube's biggest creators make. I'm going to be looking at YouTubers from across the YouTube spectrum, from gaming to technology to vlogging, all to try to determine how much each of them make. Then I'm going to try to use that information to calculate how much money MrBeast makes each year. So to start out, we need an understanding for how YouTubers make their money in the first place. Well, I would break most of their incomes down into three basic streams: AdSense, sponsorships, and merch. Each of these three different areas can provide vastly different amounts of income to different creators, depending on the specific niche they're in and who their audience is. So the first step to determining how much money a YouTuber like MrBeast makes is to look at how YouTube calculates its AdSense CPM. But before we get too far into this video, even though I'm going to be talking about how much money these other YouTubers make, I'm not making any money off of this video, so if you would please just consider leaving a like and maybe subscribing. It really helps out the channel and it doesn't cost you anything. The first source of income we're going to look at is probably the source that most people are familiar with, which is just ads on YouTube. Now these ads are paid out to different creators at different rates based on their CPM. CPM stands for cost per mil, which just means how much money advertisers are willing to pay per 1,000 impressions. This amount can vary dramatically based on factors such as country, the niche of the content, and even gender. And it's all based on bidding by different advertisers. Now YouTube does show creators what their CPM is, but this can vary dramatically from how much they're actually getting paid per view because some people use ad blocks and some videos get demonetized. So for the purposes of this video, we're going to calculate our own CPM by just taking the number of views divided by revenue times 1,000. I'm also going to be focusing this video primarily on creators in the US and Europe. That's because CPM can vary so drastically from country to country that it makes comparisons almost impossible. Also, CPMs tend to be the highest in these countries. Now, outside of country, the most important factor for determining a YouTuber's CPM is what niche they're making content for. So I scoured every video I could find on YouTube trying to find information on what the CPMs are for different niches. So in order to find this information, I did what any good engineer would do, and I just started to gather data from as many sources as possible. I watched this video, and even this video, all trying to determine what the CPMs are for different niches on YouTube. Trying to find as many people as possible from as many different niches as possible who have disclosed their analytics and talked about how much money they make. And I actually learned a lot more from this data than I was originally looking for. So first off, let's just look at the CPM for each niche. Personal finance came in with the highest CPM, paying roughly $12 per 1,000 views. Next was a category that I kind of called YouTube or entrepreneur. These included videos of people interviewing other YouTubers or entrepreneurs or talking about how to grow on YouTube, or all the actual videos that talk about CPM. I put all those into this category. These tended to have a CPM of around $7 to $8. Next is tech with a CPM of around $5. Then you have lifestyle and vloggers, which had a much lower CPM, with some of them as low as $2 per 1,000 views, but the average closer to around $3 to $4 per 1,000 views. And then rounding out the bases is gaming, with a CPM between 50 cents and $3 per 1,000 views. Now in most videos like this, that's usually about as much information as you find on CPM. But because I gathered up so many different data points in determining the different niches CPMs, I noticed another factor which seemed to be determining how much money YouTubers got from AdSense: number of subscribers. This surprised me because YouTube always says that all that matters is views and watch time. Number of subscribers shouldn't factor into that. But if you look at the CPM rates within a specific niche, they tend to be higher for bigger creators. Now, I'm not trying to get too far into the weeds here, but this is a chart I made plotting the different CPMs for different YouTubers within the personal finance niche. You can see that as the number of subscribers goes up, the CPM goes up pretty consistently. On this chart, smaller creators like Daniel Inskeep are making a CPM of around $10 per 1,000 views, while larger creators like Graham Stephan are making as much as $16 per 1,000 views. Now I saw another similar trend for tech channels, although the data here isn't quite as clean. Mostly because the data that I found on Marques Brownlee, who's one of the biggest tech review YouTubers, said he was only making a CPM of around $2. Now note, for that second chart, you may have noticed I was using a logarithmic x-axis. If you don't know what that means, that doesn't really matter. I was just trying to make the line look a little bit cleaner. Now, I can only really come up with two possibilities for why this trend might be true. The first is that advertisers are willing to pay more money for a more established brand, which is less likely to cause them problems. The other possibility is that bigger YouTubers are just better able to monetize their videos. They're better able to optimize them to get a higher CPM by making them longer, making them more ad-friendly, and maybe putting ads in the right place. Or maybe it's a combination of both. I don't know exactly, I just thought it was really interesting to see this trend, and I haven't really heard this talked about before. So using this information, we can actually calculate how much money MrBeast made from AdSense last year. As a starting point, MrBeast made a video back in 2016 showing that he was being paid a CPM of around $2.75. Now, based on the fact that YouTubers' CPM seems to go up with the number of subscribers they have, we can assume that MrBeast is making the same or higher CPM than he was back in 2016. So being super conservative and assuming he makes a CPM of $2, that would mean he made $6.4 million so far in 2020. But if he is better monetized with a CPM closer to $6, which is about the highest I've seen in the entertainment category on YouTube, that could be as high as $19.2 million just this year. Now that is a ton of money for a normal person. But you might say, is that enough money to cover all the money that he gives away in all his videos? Well, probably not, which leads us into the next source of income for YouTubers. Now, sponsorships is a tricky category to figure out. You see, most sponsored contracts with YouTubers prevent them from actually disclosing how much money they were paid for promoting a specific product. But on the other side, one nice thing about sponsors is they don't vary as much by niche, which is kind of why you see the same sorts of sponsors all over YouTube, like NordVPN and Skillshare. The only good source that I found on how much YouTubers are paid by sponsors was on this one video by Levi Hildebrand, where he says a 45 to 60 second shoutout will pay a CPM of around $20 to $40 per 1,000 views. He also said that number could be as much as 3 to 20 times higher than that if you make an entire dedicated sponsored video specifically focusing on one product. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't remember the last time that MrBeast didn't have a sponsor in one of his videos. That means that if we assume that every single one of his videos was getting the sponsored CPM rate of $20 to $40 per 1,000 views, MrBeast is making $64 to $128 million this year from those 45 to 60 second ad spots that he puts in his video. Something else which is related to this, which I just thought was really interesting, is recently MrBeast on his gaming channel did a fully sponsored video. Based on my info that CPMs for these kinds of videos could be 3 to 20 times higher than the normal sponsorship rate, that means that for that video, which right now has around 5.8 million views, MrBeast could have been paid anywhere from $350,000 to $4.5 million just for that one video. But that's still not the final source of MrBeast income. There's still one more source which some YouTubers have used to make an absolute killing on YouTube: merch. Now, if you thought sponsorships were hard to calculate, figuring out how much money YouTubers make from merch sales is incredibly difficult. This is because for each individual creator, it's super specific. It all depends on how much they push their merch, what kind of audience they have, what kind of margins they make on the merch that they sell. For example, at their peak, Logan and Jake Paul made an absolute killing from their merch just because they pushed it so much. In fact, they made so much money from their merch that Logan Paul actually never did a sponsored video because he would rather just push his own merch and make more money off of that. But in other niches like personal finance, merch really doesn't sell that well at all. So in order to figure out how much money MrBeast is making from merch, the best I can do is borrow from economics and use efficient market theory. Now, I know that Logan Paul exclusively pushed his merchandise, which seems to indicate that he was provided a higher effective CPM from pushing the merch than he would have gotten from a sponsorship. And I know that many other YouTubers, a lot of them smaller, don't push merch at all because a sponsor would pay a much higher CPM than their merch would give them. Basically, I'm assuming that each YouTuber's own merch line has to compete in the general market with all advertisers, and they have to earn the same rate of return on their merch that they would earn from another sponsor in order to want to push their own merch line. So by seeing how hard a specific creator pushes merch relative to other sponsors, we can determine how high their CPM is for their merchandise. Now, MrBeast actually doesn't push his merch all that hard. In fact, a lot of the time, he just wears his merch in the background or at best gives it a quick 5-second mention during the video, which contrasts kind of sharply to his long 60-second spots that he does for Honey. This leads me to believe that MrBeast's CPM for his merch line is actually lower than most sponsors are willing to pay him, but not too much lower because he is still willing to promote it somewhat. So let's assume that his merch has around half the CPM that we heard for sponsors, so around $10 to $20 per 1,000 views. Let's then also assume that he only pushes his merch in about 1 out of every 10 videos. This would mean that he made between $3.2 and $6.4 million from his merch sales in 2020. Now, before I give you the total amount that MrBeast makes, you should know that all of these numbers are just revenue. It's not like they get to keep all of this money. A big part of that has to go to taxes. Now, no, I'm not a tax professional. I don't want to be a tax professional, so please consult a real tax professional before using any of these numbers for yourself. But in addition to the normal income taxes that everybody has to pay, YouTubers are actually considered as self-employed, which means they need to pay 100% of their Social Security and Medicare taxes, for which most people's employers pay around half. This means that right off the top, 15.3% of their income goes right to taxes. To offset that though, YouTubers do have one tax advantage: deductions. You can normally deduct certain expenses from the income in your business and not pay taxes on those expenses. So for example, if you owned a lawn mowing business and you had to buy more lawnmowers, those could be expensed from your taxes. The thing with YouTubers though, is anything they use to make content could be considered as a tax expense. I always think of Casey Neistat's crazy $21,000 airplane seat ticket. Now, he was probably given that for free, but if he wasn't, he could have deducted that on his taxes. Or look at all the money that MrBeast gives away in his videos. Sometimes 10, 100, or even $1 million per video. You can bet that he's deducting those on his taxes. A lot of YouTubers also have employees who either edit their videos or help do production for them. So all of these expenses also have to be removed from that initial revenue amount that we're calculating. So with that in mind, without further ado, let's add up exactly how much money MrBeast made in 2020. Now, I know MrBeast runs like 6 YouTube channels, so I'm only going to focus on his 2 biggest channels for this final calculation: MrBeast and MrBeast Gaming. This is because I really don't think these other channels contribute that much to his earnings yet, and they're kind of dwarfed by his main channel and his gaming channel. So let's add up the numbers. We have between $6.4 and $19.2 million in AdSense, $64 to $128 million in sponsorships, $3.2 to $6.4 million from his merch, and then we can also add in the money he makes from his gaming channel. So this means MrBeast is making $82.6 million on the low end, to $172.5 million in 2020 on the high end. Now, if you are at all like me, I was absolutely shocked by these numbers. Even though I literally just did the calculations myself, they're really hard to believe. He's basically running a decent-sized company that produces profits like an actual corporation. Now, that is a lot of money, and I don't want anybody to go and criticize MrBeast because he makes a lot of money. I want to point out that MrBeast has actually said his long-term goal is to basically make as much money as possible from his different YouTube channels so that he can eventually give it all away. I think a big part of MrBeast's success is people can tell that he's genuinely just a good guy. And so they feel really good watching his content and supporting him. Plus, his content's just really entertaining. So which of your favorite YouTubers have you always wanted to know how much they make? Well, you can use the steps that I used in this video to calculate it for yourself. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like. And if you don't want to miss out on any future videos in the future, make sure to both subscribe and hit the notification bell. I'll see you next time.